Welcome to Tacos and Trends, the podcast hosted by Made Trends. I'm Autumn Zimmerman, and my guest here today is DAPHNE Barron from Serotina Media Inc. DAPHNE, why don't you give us a little background on your company?
Oh my goodness. Hi, thanks for having me. We're turning 8 this year, which is wild. Founded in Montreal, moved here to Toronto. We're purely a social media agency, from everything from strategy, content creation, digital data and insights. Now we do UGC and influencer in-house, which is super exciting, but working with corporate and national brands and some personalities too, across all the platforms.
Amazing. And you've been part of our new Tacos and Trends initiative. This is like the recap to our in-person presentation. So you and I put together a presentation about Gen Z and social media trends for 2025. And the first wrap was in New York in person. We were attempting to give it here in Los Angeles, but due to the fires, we just had to host it as a webinar. I think we have some hot takes from the difference of an in-person presentation and a webinar, so we should get into it. Just a shout out to anyone who's listening. If you like the content or want to talk to us more, make sure you subscribe, follow forward, and we'll make sure to post all of our information in the comments. So I think just to get into it, for having this recap here, I think our big learning today was an in-person event is not the same as a webinar. And also, apparently, tacos are a big actual draw to the content. So first question of the day, where are tacos? Yeah, definitely. So tell me so I think we had a quick chat about this and we were like, this is good content. So I think what we saw is a webinar still requires like a lot of interaction, right? Which is harder to do, but it seemed like what our guests responded best to was actually like checking in with them, introducing them. And I think, as you mentioned, some of the quick takeaway is it could be a little bit long if you have 40 slides in 40 minutes. Thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, you and I have known each other for a long time, so we could just banter, go back and forth and giggle and hee hee ha ha so organically. And that translated so well when we were in real life doing the first presentation. And so I think we were a little naive to think that we could just repeat that over a screen. And so, less content, more pointed. We could send the deck after, but leave a bit more space for you and I to go back and forth with the concepts that we've already baked together, and not just run everyone through the slides.
Yep, agreed. Because I think it's better like to do that, as you said, like we can email that out to people, they can view it later. But I think that is like part of the magic. And so again, so the topic was Gen Z social media. And I feel like maybe since we didn't get to it so well in the actual presentation, why don't we just like deep dive into like, okay, what our key takeaway is, right? Totally. So anyone could like jump on here and hear what we were thinking.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I wish I would have iterated more and more throughout. I mean, it's the title. It's a Zoomer's world, and we're living on it. Like Gen Z is the one setting the trends in this social landscape, then those get lived in real life and then come back around on social. And so because they're the ones setting those trends, the influence they have on the millennials and boomers, yes, in their purchasing power, as you mentioned, but then in the social construct. And so they really are the ones driving force between social. And that's why knowing their headspace and zeitgeist so well is important, to know what content makes sense for the social landscape today. Because even though like we talked about it in the presentation, right, being offbeat and like cultural heat isn't for every brand. And we even gave a couple examples where millennials created it thinking it would land with Gen Z and without validating it with a Gen Z C-suite. So I think just reiterating why it's Gen Z's, we could have done a little bit more in the landscape of social.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's, I think it's hard because everyone likes to think like, oh, like the youth has always been like a driving force, like a cultural force, but it's like how different this is with like the tools they have and the voice that they have. And also whenever we have this like society that's like obsessed with staying young, I think, whenever we started talking about Gen Z, it literally was about like, oh, their spending power, which is obviously like globally insane. But I think as well, it's also what's like powering it that no one's talking about yet. It's just that you have an older generation that's like obsessed with staying young. They're obsessed with like, right, with like longevity, health and wellness, dressing young, looking young, like what's the young makeup trend, what's this? And since it's moving so fast, right, it's like faster to keep up with. So
and it's still available to them online. Like you can participate on TikTok the same way, independent of your age. And it's right there for them to like validate and see if they are youthful. Like if they know the internet speak, like we talked about, right? If they know that it's like a way to like validate their youthfulness and they're not 60, right? They can like kind of pretend like they're only 50. Like 60 is the new 50 kind of thing.
Definitely. And I think what we have seen, what's like the biggest hit of from the presentation is definitely this like internet speak. And I think it's like interesting for the older listener as well, that internet speak is just like the new word for slang. But I think for me, there's like two takeaways. I think it's really funny, this format of like this like slang internet speak that not everyone understands and trying to figure out what it means collectively. But I think as well, it speaks to like the bigger trend as well of like people want to be entertained, which I think for a webinar point of view as well, like I also have attended a lot of webinars where I like halfway listen, halfway work, screen off. I think if I had to set like the standards of like what's a successful webinar is, one, people turn their videos on and they're engaged. They're like engaged with, right? I think they're being engaged with each other. I thought that was great that people were putting their LinkedIns in the chat so they could connect and we're like open. But I think what we see, like what really leaves an impact is like entertainment. People want to laugh, which I think is like part of your like thesis as well, right? Like social media, people are looking for something lighthearted. People want to connect. And so I think, taking our own advice and applying it to that webinar.
Not
for
that
me,
serious.
Yeah, it's not that serious. And, people want to feel like part of the conversation. Like maybe it's even more like than a webinar seems so serious. Like maybe it's even more like a fireside chat, which I don't really like that word, but you know what I mean? It's like, welcome to the house.
We need to tacos and trend this. We need to like remarket. It's not because we should totally do another one. Like the in-person ones are a little bit more intimate and everyone's craving in real life after COVID. But if we could figure out a way, because webinars are really accessible and it's, easier for the lift is a little lower for us. But if we could come up with a new name, I'm sure we'll figure something out. Yeah. But what?
No, I think it's true. I think just like the like webinar format, like that's not our format. Like I think we're more conversational. I think it's right. We have like, and I think we like to like riff off ideas. We're like creative people, right?
Well, another thing we could do also, I mean, it depends on the demo that we want. I know we said in the presentation, right, like the generation continuum, like it's so easy for us to like bucket Gen Z, boomers, zoomers, but at the same time, like they are fluid. But the one thing I did think about is like, what if we actually did it as a shared screen on live? Like TikTok's lives are like all the rage. And so, like the lift to get some of the boomers and our actual clients on it, they might not like get it. It won't be as intuitive, but at the same time, that's really how we can have the conversation in a way that is relevant to the content.
I know we talked about a little bit about the content we're going to talk about here in the webinar, but I'm going to throw you a curveball. Yeah. No, like based on authenticity. So I think it's funny in like seeing your microphone there. I know that we talked about having a podcast many years ago. And I think it's also, but I think it's to be for full transparency. I think I was at that point only comfortable with a podcast that was like very anonymous, like that was like almost like a big brother voice chiming in thoughts on things. And I think it's interesting as I consider like my own business and how to market it and how to get like our ideas out there. I think that this big trend that you talked about today, like authenticity and like that it's okay to be yourself, is like not now, when. And I think like for me, as well as I mentioned, like as an old millennial, it feels like much more comfortable now being able to be like, oh, I can be myself. I can talk about what we're doing at work. I think when we talked about having the podcasts before, it was like in the height of like the millennial reign of like, a perfect grid, a perfect life. And I think that's not something that like my business or myself ever really like subscribe to. So I think that also, I think you've always been here, and the like it's like authentic and real and like willing to like talk about things. But it's like definitely like a generational shift. And so I imagine as we like look at our customers as well, it's like something to imagine that like it's a pain point for them as well. For me, it was a huge pain point.
Yeah, I mean, two things I want to say there. I mean, like we talked about doing a podcast probably 3-4 years ago, which is like crazy to think. So that's one note. I also two things. So we just did like our 2024 reporting on social media and all the platforms. And actually the team at Serotina runs Serotina like a client, and my content that relates to the business like a client. And the number one thing, and I've been hesitant to like overshare or what's appropriate. I want to make sure, you know, I still come off clean and polished, because, you know, some of my customers are a bit more old school, working like banks, but then some are much more like youthful and young. And so, but the number one thing, content that performed well for me was when I kind of threw that to the wind and just was like, no makeup, really like disheveled hair, like curly hair. I'm always trying to make sure. And it was crazy to see. And the team has been pushing that, especially the young team members have been pushing that for years. So it's uncomfortable. But then second to that, I've booked more business by doing, so about 8 months ago, I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to be a creator for the company. Like I might as well. And so, I started this company because I couldn't be an influencer quick enough. Like, I don't know if I've ever talked about that with you. I like tried, and you know, my mom and she was like, and my dad are like, we are not bankrolling this. Are you crazy? So I was like, okay, cool. I'll like do it for other people instead. Anyway, but so many prospects who are now clients saw me doing that and were like, okay, you get it, because I don't get it. And you get it because not only are you selling it, but you're also doing it. And so you're going to think about me in that context. And I'm sell my product way better now that I'm doing it. It's just, but it's uncomfortable. It's not ideal. It's not my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think sometimes like if you choose to have a business, right, you're like, it's not always comfortable. That's like the truth of it. Like, I think, you know, we talk about that endlessly. I think as well, whenever you talk about, just as like a key takeaway, which I think is super important as well, like we keep talking about like the younger team members. I think like within the business context, it's like important that we like give them like the space they want, right? And so I think it is really about making sure within your organization, whether it's like formal or informal, I feel like it could be as informal as like a tacos and trends. Like it could be lunchtime conversations. And I think it's really important to make sure for successful businesses, you have some sort of filter that's like a Z suite. You know what I mean? I think that's like completely required, and like serves as a litmus test. Like not that like you have to do everything that comes out of that, but I think it's an interesting just perspective that you don't want to miss.
And going back to our presentation, right, at the slide towards the end where it's, let me just pull up the title so anyone listening can reference back to the slide and like see it visually if that helps them. But basically, hold on, I'm just going through which cultural heat is right for your brand. And those 3 pillars that we say are really, really important. But, you know, like at least for both of us in our respective companies, like that risk tolerance, right? And so what are we ultimately it's with our decision, but at least it's our decision, but having the space to play, and then we have to decide, and as long as it's not offensive or as long as it's not offensive or you know, completely like out political, you know, like that, those are some lines that are like hard to navigate. You just delete it. Like we literally just posted something and I was a little bit more vulnerable than I wanted to be, like hoping to like get more attendance for the webinar. And I was like, had like 50 views. I'm like, we're just going to delete that. Move on next after one that literally just hit 1 million views. So it's like, it's not, the stakes are actually relatively low.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. I think people forget that they can like delete things. And I think for brands, I think it's what you talked about as well in the presentation is that, you know, like brands traditionally in marketing, right? And these like huge spends, they're normally used to being like quite slow, process driven, approval driven, right? And I think that whenever you think about like marketing and how it works now, it's like much faster. So you have to have like a fast engine where you're like, oh, okay, we are going to try new things, but we also know how to like untry them, like get rid of them quickly.
Well, that's what like we were talking about this in the presentation. That's where, at least in the social context, so some of our clients have like huge legal teams and we need to get the social calendar to them. It's 90 days before posting. like we don't even know what's trending in social by then, right? And so keep fine, the legal department needs that's your framework right now, which obviously we're pushing to evolve, but that they're not comfortable yet. But then we have a real-time calendar that goes right to one person in the legal team who has the authority to, you know, we have to, but there's a different task force, similar to you talked about, like that C-suite. But yeah, you have to adapt, because this like campaign you plan 12 months out, like that is so, it's obvious now that that's not the social landscape, but you'll die. Like it's just not.
No, I think that you saw like there was tons of press in the last few weeks about like the rebranding at Walmart. And obviously, you know, these are like millions of dollars spent, task force teams, agencies, and really like, so, you know, if you've like worked with any of these companies, like how big that lift was, and then what the new logo and branding is like basically the same.
Yeah, I didn't even hear about this. Hold on, I mean, we're not that isolated in Canada. I'm like, Google real quick.
We've just posted about it on the blog. But it honestly was like, just like, it like is just like a shadow of itself. So I think, you know, whenever you think about that, you're like, oh, it's much more interesting whenever you talk about like a brand, like we've talked about like Midday Squares, or we talk about like Liquid Death, and they're like, oh, okay, like they've been successful because I think Liquid Death says they tested like 1,000 campaigns at once. Like, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this. And like, let's see what hits. And it didn't even matter that what hit or what didn't hit. It was like the volume and like the action and the engagement. And through that, they found their voice. But you have to be very nimble, and like a big brand sometimes isn't that way. So I think at least figuring out how a small portion of your business can be nimble is important.
Totally. And like some of these bigger brands, right, where you've got like tons of employees, like, you know, you have how many employees is Walmart have, excuse me, right? Where, you know, the narrative has to stay consistent through all of it. Like, okay, yeah, like that we get, but, and especially some of the founder-led brands, it's a little bit easier because you can like make decisions on the fly, and they thrive in the social landscape. Granted, they're willing to make those decisions real quickly and not think about it too seriously. Midday Squares is incredible at that. They've really made noise there.
Yeah, no, I think Liquid Death as well, right? I think
they're the like, leader. In my opinion, they're the leaders.
Yeah, definitely. Wait, did I hear you say that you had a post that went viral? You had 1 million views? You want to tell us what it was about?
Totally. So the TikTok, sorry.
No, let's get some hype around it.
No, totally. So the TikTok ban, right, so we're recording this on January 23rd, and just this past weekend, TikTok ban happened. But right before it did, creators were getting online and kind of divulging like their secrets, and they were using the Family Guy soundbite. And some of them are like, hee hee ha ha, I didn't actually drink that coffee, or hee hee ha ha, like I never actually did all those workouts I claimed to do. Like kind of light. And then some, I wish I knew the name, but probably good for them. I'm not going to give them more hype. One fitness influencer was like, hate to break it to you, but I actually had a BBL. And like just wildness. And you know my mom and how I grew up, like, you know, there's a lot of discretion and there's things you very much keep to yourself. And I just posted a video, and I was just so like, I know there's like people are embellishing and over, like I get that they're performing, they're essentially performing, but I just was so appalled at it. And I just got on TikTok again, me being really candid. The team was, I just like I got on it with a green screen, and we did like a stitch, and I was just like, this is wild. I can't wrap my head around it. Like, how are you guys doing this? Like, take this to your grave. And yeah, I got like over, I think, on 900,000 views, and it just went viral, which is great. And it's crazy. I'm like wiping food off my face. Yeah, it's crazy.
Amazing. Well done. So obviously the TikTok ban, I don't think we need to get into it. I'm tired of talking about the TikTok ban. But anything else aside from the TikTok ban, what are you most excited about in social this year? Aside from this like ability to be like unapologetically yourself.
Well, again, something a theme we have really talked about, and we in our mini postmortem before we turn the mics on, I think, you know, empowering people to be on more than one platform to diversify your social assets, just like you would a business, right? If you've got income or revenue just from one service line that, you know, could get cut at any time. And so I think because TikTok, you could be so successful on TikTok so quickly, and the barrier to entry was relatively low. Like TikTok has only been around for like 3-4 years. I mean, 5, I guess, but really taking shape. And so I think it's more people, I think, get now that you shouldn't just be on one platform, where we would push that and it kind of felt like we were like force feeding them that, but they didn't really get it. They're like, it's fine, let's just be on one. Or the worst part is they try and beat all of them terribly. And so I'm really kind of excited. I think the default to the big three, like Meta, TikTok, Snap, LinkedIn, I think that default's going to change. I've been predicting this for a long time, that more micro, whether it's Blue Sky or whether it's Discord or whether it's Pinterest, they're actually huge, but they're not one of the big players that you are expected to be on. And then the other thing that's really, really interesting, some brands that have more of like a cult-like following with them, they I forget the name of it, but they're actually just using their website as their like social hub. And so like the social platforms are kind of second tier to them, and they just want to, like, they're doing 3-4 blogs a day and blogging as if it's a social media content production to really keep it owned and in control of their data, really. But I think those two things are really interesting, that the TikTok plan is kind of giving them permission to do. And then it makes our job more fun because there's different mediums we get to explore. It's not just the same platforms over and over again.
No, I think it's like interesting. I think as well, like just as well, whenever you think about just people are also like looking through for a way to like cut through, right? Like I think honestly for me, as in my space as well, like the changes and like the shift to Substack this year has been wild. I feel like I know tons of people who have like old school Substacks, but like the uptick in Substack and the type of content people, for me, it's like Substack doesn't have like, it's not like a dopamine hit. It's not super sticky, but like it's, I think almost the amount of time that has to go in to create the content that hits there, it's like just a very different demographic, right? And so I think as well, you can also see like how different platforms are going to serve like a different customer, right? And a different, like clearly different purpose.
Different customer, to your point. And then as a brand, you decide how you show up there for that. Like, so again, a lot of brands just want to hit, like they make their customer Jessica, who's middle class, like they're just so broad sweeping. And so, but no, like who is that, archetype, that smaller archetype? Yeah, no, I'm here for it. It makes our job a bit harder, but why not?
but exciting. I feel like, and I think knowing like you and I both, what we like is like to learn new things. We like challenges. I feel like we thrive in that. And
that's the fun part.
Definitely. Cool. So I think up next for us is let's figure out, I feel like knowing our personalities, I feel like we need to like crack this like webinar code, because I think we didn't, I feel like since it wasn't like, I don't think it was perfect today. And, I feel like after we had our last in-person event, I feel like it was such a success, like for us, like just for us, like success being a judgment of like attendance, feedback, client leads, like engagement was amazing. And for me, when walking away from today after the webinar, I feel like, for me, there's a big learning in a lot of things I think that we could do different, how we position it, how we contact like before, how we do guest lists, things like that. So I think I would love to propose, like we figure out how to crack like a webinar code. Let's do
one for Feb, March.
Yeah, I think we got to figure it out. And I think maybe it's also interesting as well, we should figure out something as well, like how to like keep like maybe in micro doses, like updating like the content as like in this like evolving landscape, because I think definitely people loved the synergy between Made Trends and Serotina.
Yeah, they love the quick wit. What's one thing like top of mind you would have done differently? Like if we were recording it, if we were gonna do it at 6 Eastern right now, what's one thing right away we would have done differently?
I think I would have been like deck by. Like it could have just been playing in a reel.
The Autumn and Daphne show.
Yeah. And I think I would have like literally just been like, okay, here's an outline of what we're going to talk about. And like, I think what feels more successful to me, like I like to listen a lot, even though I'm like constantly talking. What I really enjoy is like listening and like figuring out what people need and what their problems are at work. And so I think, although it doesn't feel like this format lends itself as much to like collaboration and networking like that, I feel like, and even if it started with like you and I like collaborating more, like the hit back and forth, like I feel like for it to be successful, I need like that vibe of like, oh, okay, people got like what we talk about, like they're like inside our heads.
Yeah, the postmortem. So G and I also he said like, shorter content from you two and having a little bit more of a discussion, like open it up. That was really successful in real life. And actually this webinar, there was also a lot of that it just wasn't positioned to be that. And then, but people were like, wait, what? We want to talk to you. And we love talking to people.
Yeah, no, and I think as well, like we tell a lot of our clients as well, like there's like a lot of like visual vocabulary, I think, of what how people are used to digesting content. And I think everyone, including me, is like bored out of my mind to like sit and watch people click through a deck. Like we're having the same problem all the time. I honestly think the format, like people are much more used to from social media, like a green screen with like, I would have like almost had it be like a TikTok video, like green screen.
Totally.
And
going behind us.
Yeah, I think that would have been, and I think as well, because you have to, I think to engage people, you need to meet them in like a format that's like sticky for them right now. So I think that would have been like, I would have just been like, this is like, which we maybe should have thought about. I think it was just like this like quick response to like, oh no, these buyers, we still want to give like our audience like what they were expecting. But yeah, I think I would make it like an extended TikTok video.
No, we should have done a Discord or something. I mean, like, again, like the barrier to entry and stuff like that. But yeah, I think, I echo everything you just said. We should ask Danny and been like, wait, what would you be? Or like when we're answering, when the people are like, how does Gen Z see this? And the two millennials are like, this is what they think. And I was like, oh, wait.
And then Jess is like, no, we don't.
I like that. I like that she was like, well, actually, this isn't it. But it was much more articulate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's fine.
So cool. So let's do this again. I feel like there's endless amounts of content for people who are listening. Our next episode is going to be about health and wellness and longevity, like a hot topic with people spending lots of money. Also hot topic with Gen Z showing up all over social in a multitude of different ways. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of it. And again, if you like the content, follow along and we'll have more coming for you soon. Thanks. Thank you, DAPHNE.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.